That brings us to our political plays of the week. Democrat analyst Michael John Gray is here, Republican strategist Stephen Hauserman both here. Guys, what do you make of the World Cup becoming a political stage?
So I think everything's a political stage these
Fair
days.
point.
With social media, with 24-hour news cycle, no one can avoid some sort of political stage. This is not new. This is not new. It gets more air, more people see it. Let's back up and not call it the women's national team. I believe now we can say that the U.S. women's soccer team is the national team, and we might all just call it men's soccer and women's national. They're pretty successful. People are going to disagree. The invitation to the White House is a big deal, but I think athletes, celebrities, but even leaders in communities sometimes take a stand for how they feel things ought to be, and we may not agree with it, but it's certainly her choice. I think there are people that fall on both sides of this argument. Unfortunately, most of our lives have become some kind of political stage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is unfortunate. It has become a little political. You know, I think an invitation to the White House is important. It's something that, you know, most people, I suppose, would look at as one chance in a lifetime. But maybe you don't respect the people that occupy the White House or the administration, but you respect the position of the presidency and the White House.
Yeah, so at some point, that's always the argument, and it's hard to refute that. At the end of the day, if the four of us up here treated somebody out there really bad, then couldn't figure out why they wouldn't come to our party. I mean, we've got to use a little common sense there.
Okay. I want to get to the citizenship question on the 2020 census. This is something that's been talked about for the past week now. From my understanding, this question hasn't been on the census since 1950. Why now?
So why now is the question. I think that's why we're seeing the Supreme Court arguments is, why now? Because it polls good. Why now? Because the president and the leaders in his party have found that immigration and citizenship and people that don't necessarily look like them are a good wedge issue for politics. The Census Bureau took it off in the 50s and 60s, along with other questions, because they found they weren't getting accurate information. The census shouldn't be a political game. This is how communities large and small, states large and small, get the funding they need to provide the necessary resources to their citizens.
But do we see this passing?
Well, the Trump administration is going to have to find a way to argue that. I think they said that there was a little bit of a lack of evidence when they moved down lower court, and that was part of the reason.
Right.
But what was important out of the Supreme Court decision was that they did not invalidate the question. The question is still valid, and they think that there's some substance there, but they need to spend more time looking at the evidence there.
All right, let's play dumb here. We don't understand why. A lot of people out there. So my question for each of you, why is it important for a Republican-led president? Why for the Democrats do they not want it on there?
So I don't think it's just necessarily, so once again, it's real easy to say that. It's not necessarily just Democrats that don't want it on it. These are people in Washington that are charged with a very important job to get a count done, every 10 years to get the count done. They saw in the 50s and 60s, when there wasn't the political debate over immigration issues and things at our southern border, that Japanese Americans were targeted by that count and put in detention centers, some here in Arkansas. It also found that people were afraid to answer some of the questions or didn't answer them accurately, and the funding, the things that these communities needed didn't get. It polls great. It polls great. You go to any coffee shop, anybody watching right now, 60% of the people are for it, but we don't govern based on polls. We govern on what's best for our country.
Stephen, very quickly.
Well, I think what's important here is apportionment, right, for representation within our states. And I think this really cuts out a lot of rural America. You have cities on the coast that typically have a high population density of illegal immigrants. And when you include them, even though they cannot vote as legal citizens, when you include them into the population, they get more representation, and that cuts out a lot of small states like Arkansas and some of these smaller rural communities.
All right. Thank you so much.